So-Called is sponsored by loveboiseparks.org, which donates profits to support, promote, and preserve open spaces in Boise, Idaho. Use promo code SOCALLED for 10% off all your purchases at loveboiseparks.org.
I have a Yertle syndrome. I want to be king of everything. And you don't have to be king of everything. Just be king of enough. And the rest of it, take your time to, develop sort of long-term relationships.
This is Mark Wojcik, and I'm wondering, how's your so-called career? Welcome to So-Called, the podcast that explores the why and how of work. On today's episode, we meet Steve Adelman, Nightlife Entrepreneur. When we met, I asked Steve about his title and what a nightlife entrepreneur does.
Over the last 30 years, I've either directed or started my own and owned probably up to 15 different nightlife venues, ranging from nightclubs in major cities like New York, Los Angeles, actually in Singapore, to concert venues, to smaller things like sort of lounges and bars. And the entrepreneurial portion of that is the things that I've started, the majority of them, I sort of started from scratch with an idea.
Steve didn't begin his career as a nightlife entrepreneur. It was a transition from a job he didn't love, and it happened as a result of a party at his apartment.
Well, I actually, like a lot of people, I grew up in sort of a, I guess you could say, standard middle-class, small town, with a sort of education-driven, classic, Jewish family, Jewish mother, my son, the doctor, the lawyer, and that was it. So I sort of followed that path, and I went through, I got a degree, an undergraduate degree, then went on to graduate school in economics, undergraduate degree in economics also. And then began working in the field with this very, very prestigious firm in Boston as an economic consultant. And after about 6 months, I realized one thing. I hated everything about it. So after, 6 years of higher education, actually 7 years, because I had, at the time that began this consulting job, I was working on my PhD. I decided, well, I've got to, I'm the kind of person where if my heart's not into it, I got to care, really care. And I just, at that time, I couldn't see myself, moving forward for years and years and years with something I didn't really care about. It wasn't really interesting. I mean, it was, everyone's, what a great job you got and you're on your way. And I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't use the word boring. My heart wasn't into it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what my heart would be into because for 7-8 years, I had a certain plan and I sort of dictated to myself without any real information other than I convinced myself that that's what it was. And then when I got into the real world applications of it, I thought, man, I got to find something else. So what happened was I went to, actually a friend of mine rented out my apartment for a party. I lived in this kind of classic Back Bay Boston apartment, and she wanted to rent it out. She wanted to throw an event there because she was an event planner. And I met this guy who was about to open up a nightclub in downtown Boston. And he said, well, with that background, I'm looking for someone to help me with my business plan. So I said, I got to make money. Like I don't have a job. So I said, oh yeah. And I was cheap. So I got in there right away and I didn't really do much work on the business plan, but I became interested in how the whole business ran, from the ordering to the management to the promotions. And it seemed like an environment where someone could have an idea and then you get almost immediate feedback, right? So, in the actual nightclub business, you're creating these different nights. So you plan them out and then you can see the reaction right in front of your face. So that interests me. And I gave myself my first title in the nightlife world, which was the manager of stuff and sort of the master of none. So I sort of run around and kind of try to learn the business.
I mean, it sounds like you might have an interest in music, but it wasn't a music career that got you into nightclubs.
No, in fact, it gets worse. I had never really gone to clubs. I loved music, but I didn't really associate that. I got into the concert business years after that, maybe 10 or 15 years. So I started in the sort of the nightclub, doing nightclubs, and I wasn't a drinker. I never really went to clubs. So I wasn't, most people in that business, they become a bartender, then they become assistant manager, and over time they open up their own place. I didn't do any of that. I just sort of jumped right in there. And while I was at this place in Boston, I met this guy who was opening up a club in New York. And he said to me, "Wow, I love this club, and who's sort of directing it?" And I said, "Well, I'm manager of stuff." I think he thought I met the manager of all the stuff. I said, "Well, I really like this place. I'd like to hire you to come to New York." And I'm like, "Let me check it out." So I got on a plane. I remember I had a hockey duffel bag, and I went to the club, and he said, "Okay, you're hired. Start working." And I'm like, I had no idea, zero. So I started just sort of looking around, figuring out what I should do. The second person I met other than him was a gentleman named Gregory Holmes, who's a pretty well-known sort of art director, marketing person in New York. He was doing the marketing, or about to do the marketing, for this new club that was opening up. And he sort of helped me out and pointed me around, and without having any input from me, really, I just sort of helping out, the club opened and it became the biggest nightclub in New York City 6 months later.
Wow.
It was called the Roxy. So people associate the success of that. So this guy made me the director of the Roxy, right? Which is a big title. And I was running around still not knowing what I was doing. But a lot of the credit came to me. Because it was just him, me, and a few other people. And he was lucky enough to he hired them, these really great nightclub promoters that sort of worked separately, which sort of made the place successful, along with Gregory, from a marketing sort of party throwing point of view. So I got a lot of credit, and now I'm a year into it in New York, and I still had no idea what I was doing. And of course, every day I was suffering from imposter syndrome, and figuring out, man, I better get to really learn this business.
Success in making such a drastic career change wasn't easy, but Steve was driven by his interest in both the creativity and the business of nightlife and entertainment.
It's tough because breaking away and doing something new and then learning it is a tough road. I mean, there were, endless nights on people's couches, but if you're focused and, want to do it like anything else, you sort of have that stick-to-itiveness, perseverance. I think that allowed me to, things I learned in graduate school. It's funny how skills that I learned, the hours of studying and getting through these tough exams and focus, I was able to bring forward into my professional career, but in different ways. So if you like something, you naturally become better at it. Mm-hmm. So I just naturally reached out to find and learn from some of the best people and get that experience. So that's, if I knew what I did, if I know now what I knew then, I never would have done that. I mean, gotten on a plane with a duffel bag and had never been to New York. I mean, I was too stupid to know that I shouldn't be doing this and what the hell was happening. But I was engaged with, really focused on, this is something that I could, and you have, it's like anything else. You have certain successes, big or small, and they move you forward. So, the fact that the Roxy was successful made me feel good, and it had nothing to do with me, but that allowed me, it opened the door for other people to talk to me. And then a year or two later, I ended up being director at a place called the Limelight, one of the most famous clubs ever. And then that group bought 3 other clubs. So go down the road 2 more years from that, and I was directing the 4 largest nightclubs in New York City. But at that point in time, now I'm probably 4 or 5 years into it, I was ready. Mm-hmm. I was ready And, you know, New York's a tough town. You're always learning and learning and learning. But I think the imposter syndrome sort of went away. And I just became engaged in, you know, I had enough of a base education to just keep going and going and learning and just trying to wake up every day and, you know, forget my mistakes from the next day, learn from them and move forward. That's all you can do. From there, I had an opportunity and opened up with partners in Boston. And then the Boston model was doing concerts early. The building would open up at 7. This club was called Avalon and held about 2,500 people. And then that concert would end, right? And then they would take everybody out and then bring a whole new crowd in. So it became a multi-use concert nightclub venue. So was my first experience in the concert business. You know, and then from there I went on to LA and Singapore, and I facilitated that same model because it allows you to use the venue more. You have more revenue streams. You have not only late night dancing and nightclub, but you have concerts and things like that. So I took that model and sort of ran with it.
What has kept you in it all of this time? Is it learning new things? Is it just you still enjoy it? What's keeping you in it?
You know, it's simple. Waking up in the morning and knowing that I can have an idea, any idea, good or bad, right? Mm-hmm. And see it through. Yeah. That's it. It's creative. It's the creativity. The business end of it, you kind of get the hang of after, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years now.
Yeah.
But you still get a thrill out of, well, let's do this or let's try this. You know, the people that live the longest are people that can keep their creative mind going. They said, I think they did a study and they said the one field where people live the longest, their profession, is architects. And I can understand why. You keep designing and being creative when you're 95 years old.
What are you doing next? Are there other things that you're doing or want to do in the future that you're looking forward to?
Well, the first thing is I took time off from the pandemic and finally wrote my book. So that's coming out right at the beginning of 2022. It was called Nocturnal Admissions is the name of the book. And it's a series of sort of funny essays that take you through the 30 years that I've experienced in nightlife. And then we have a concept, kind of a new, a lot of it is you know, I can't really talk that much about it, but it's sort of a new socializing concept that involves retail dining and nightlife. So our premise for the new concept is people's sort of sensibilities have changed after the pandemic, and they see socializing as being, you know, we see socializing as being a super, you know, back to being the necessity that it was. But I'm not sure people want that to be inclusive. And I'm not sure, you know, the nightlife or some of these concert venues are very expensive too also, right? So your tickets are expensive, or sitting down and getting a table at a club is a few $100s. Mm-hmm. So we've developed a concept, I think, that's more sort of casual and free flowing, and we're pretty excited about it. You know, it's exciting because, you know, now the world that's come out, we're still not out of it yet, but that's coming out of the pandemic is interesting because it kind of changed the market. For me, it's solving that puzzle. You know, now what do people want to do? That's a pretty cool puzzle to, you know, sit down and try to solve.
Looking back on your career, what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I think I would slow down and really pay more attention to each individual relationship, because I've moved and, you know, done a lot of things for various reasons, mostly sort of market work driven. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've lost touch over the years with some really great, you know, good friends and, you know, good people. So I would say slow down. And, you know, I always say, you know, I'm affected by what I call Yertle syndrome, which is I want to be king of everything. And you don't have to be king of everything. Just be king of enough. and the rest of that, take your time to, you know, develop and stay with people and develop sort of long-term relationships. When you say give it to your younger self, that was me yesterday. So I've been giving me that advice now for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's working out.
So-Called is sponsored by loveboiseparks.org, which donates profits to support, promote, and preserve open spaces in Boise, Idaho. Use promo code SOCALLED for 10% off all your purchases at loveboiseparks.org. Our theme and transition music was composed by Roberto Cavaco. All other stylings are the sound of my voice. If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know. Subscribe and leave us a review. So-Called is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and wherever you get your podcasts.